Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for allowing me to indulge myself and share that film with you. I wanted to share it with you just to take, I think it was 3 minutes and 14 seconds, just to really take the time to see the faces of the people that we're talking about. I think far too often it's easy for us to sit in boardrooms and in offices where we're talking about at a very theoretical level the people that we're trying to help, the people that essentially are looking for access and to make their own choices. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. As you've heard, I have a personal interest in this conversation here in South Korea, but also what's so fascinating to me is to see an entire country, a country mobilizing around asking these questions and figuring out what is right for them. And what I hope to do today is to walk you through a few examples of what we're doing and the structure of how we do it. We work purely internationally. We do not make investments even within the United States. And so to offer up this sort of international example as a way for South Koreans in particular to start getting involved and to start learning and to start seeing what else is happening out there, to learn from that and then to build from that. So I want to start today by telling you a story. It's a story about two entrepreneurs, Shafi Madha and Ravi Krishna, who saw a need and turned it into a business opportunity with true social impact. Shafi was back in Bombay, having studied in the US. I believe one or other of Shafi and Ravi did indeed study at the Columbia Business School. So Shafi was back in Bombay, and Ravi was still in New York City when, within a few months of each other, both of their mothers fell critically ill. Shafi was in Bombay when his mother needed to be rushed to the hospital, and he realized, who do I call? Ravi, on the other hand, was in New York City when his mother had a stroke, and he instantly called 911. The ambulance turned up within 5 minutes and of the disaster occurring. His mother was receiving some of the world's best medical care in a top New York City hospital. Shafi's mother was less fortunate, and while she has recovered today, the disparity of services and ambulance availability struck both Shafi and Ravi simultaneously, and they were individuals with money to pay for healthcare. Bombay is a city of 18 million people with a population density 4 times that of Manhattan. It's estimated that somewhere between 50 to 70% of the city of Bombay are either homeless or live in informal slum housing. The total ambulance fleet in the city of Bombay, again 18 million people, that's the entire population of the country of Australia where I grew up, is 70 ambulances. And most of them are in fact used to transport dead bodies. In the case of an emergency, most people will either put their loved ones in a taxi or in a rickshaw and hope that the traffic isn't bad enough so that they can still receive medical care by the time that they arrive. What Shafi and Ravi realized was that even though the government was unable to provide this service, it wasn't good enough that people were dying due to lack of critical emergency medical care that could be provided to them in an ambulance. Okay, so we're talking about an ambulance service. What's the innovation? So this ambulance service, what Shafi and Ravi did was they set up a for-profit ambulance company. It's the first for-profit company in all of India to offer services to both paying and non-paying customers. So what happens is, if you call the ambulance and you ask to be taken to a private hospital where you will pay for the medical care that you receive, then you are charged the full cost of the trip in the ambulance. If, on the other hand, you're some of the 50 to 70% who live in informal slum housing and you cannot afford to pay for the cost of the hospital and you ask to be taken to a government hospital, then the cost of your trip in that ambulance is subsidised. So the business model of 1298 has a subsidy built into it so that the exact type of care is given no matter whether or not you can pay. They have not once turned down a customer due to inability to pay. And the interesting thing is, what they've found is that many of the customers that have had their subsidised trips and have been asked to be taken to a government hospital have come back and have found the drivers of an ambulance and tried to give them money. Whereas some of the customers who've asked to be taken to a private hospital have in fact tried to wrangle on the price. So Acumen Fund made an investment in 1298. We made an equity investment of $1.5 million. And we also provided management assistance and talent. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more when I discuss our model. But the key thing that we are trying to do is to ensure that even though this is a business, that a minimum of 20% of all of their customers are receiving the care at this subsidised rate. One of the biggest issues for 1298 has in fact been marketing, because there's a real psychological gap when people think that services are targeted just towards the poor or just towards the wealthy. And so helping people to understand that the same quality of care can be given and is valued by people no matter where they lie on the socioeconomic scale is truly important. We talked a little bit earlier today about the spectrum of capital, and 1298 has moved now from receiving an equity investment from Acumen Fund to seeking government contracts throughout major cities within India to scale up their operations as well. This type of social entrepreneur is exactly what Acumen Fund is looking for. We're looking for individuals for whom one business, one model in one city or one place is not enough. We're looking for people who want to change the paradigm. They want to completely revolutionise the way that emergency care is offered to people within the country of India and beyond. Okay, so let's take a step back. What is Acumen Fund? What do we do? So there's a couple of confusing words when we describe ourselves. We're a non-profit social venture fund, or a venture capital fund for the poor. I mentioned earlier today, what we do is we raise philanthropic dollars. We are a charitable organisation within the United States. We do not give returns to our investors. But we then turn around and we make debt and equity investments directly into businesses that are providing clean water, affordable healthcare, affordable housing, and so on. What we then do, and this is really the crux of why a charitable model is the most successful model for us, is we provide management assistance. So we work very, very closely with our entrepreneurs, both before we invest in them, often spending time to help them write a business model, and then post-investment, really working with them to figure out what are the bottlenecks, what are the hindrances to their capacity, and of course, ultimately, to large-scale impact. While we offer no returns to our investors, we do charge interest and expect full repayment from our investees. These returns are then reinvested in new social enterprises. And to date, a few of our early investments, in fact, the A to Z BedNet company that I spoke about earlier, and we also saw a clip of them in the video, have completely repaid back their initial loan, and all other of our loans are currently up to date. Then the last thing we do is we share and we measure and we learn. Now, we've talked a little bit about, specifically within the Korean context, I think, this issue around raising capital. We've talked a lot about sort of how best to deploy that capital, and Bruce in particular is talking about some of the financial mechanisms. The question of how you raise capital is also very difficult, and in fact, Acumen, I think, is in an unusual situation, because not only are we concerned with deploying the capital, we're very concerned with raising the capital as well. We talk about what we do in these four key pillars, these four key areas, And on the revenue side in particular, something that we decided to do a few years ago was to hold ourselves accountable for our own sustainability. And we set the audacious goal to raise $100 million and have that invested by the year 2011. We were doing pretty well until about September of last year. So we've raised $80 million. And the idea there is that we have locked in investment capital for the next 5 years. So we haven't received all of this capital yet. It's in multi-year commitments. But we've locked this capital in so we know that we can make promise to our investment companies and actually follow through on that. We've talked a little bit about the capital that we have invested. I want to skip down to talent in particular, because that's something that's come up a number of times in this conference and I think is critically important. We realised this fairly early on, not only in order to provide management assistance. We need MBAs, we need people that are moving from the business sector, from the consulting sector and into the social sector, of which, Anthony spoke this morning. There's a ton of interest. But specifically talent, we're thinking about in two ways. We're thinking about it both in terms of developing specific skill sets that we know that our enterprises, our investees need, as well as building leadership for the sector. We're talking about hybrid business models that use business skills, business knowledge and know-how to impact social change and social good. And so in order to do that, we need leaders as well who are able to balance both of those two aspects in their own leadership styles. So internally within Acumen, we spend a lot of time thinking about professional development, investing in our people. And then externally, we have a fellowship program. And what this does is comb the world, essentially. Every year we have 10 exceptional individuals, young leaders who have business skills, who we believe are going to make a significant impact within the social sector. And we invest, they give us a year and we invest in them and send them one person to one investment for 9 months. So that fulfills our critical requirement of providing hands-on management assistance, as well as really helping us to learn. And this knowledge pillar is the last piece of what we have, how we talk about the work that we do. And this, I think in particular, this is where we have partnered with business schools to create case studies. We talked a little bit earlier today about how we understand and how we know that we're having the impact that we want to have. And in fact, by partnering with business schools and with other institutions, research institutions, can help us to understand about the impact that we're actually having. And finally, whilst Acumen does not interact at a high level with government, what we're starting to understand is that if you have the right business models, if you have the right investments in the right models, then we can start to understand what a conversation with the government would look like around shifting policies as well. So how do we decide who to invest in? There's essentially 4 key criteria. Financial sustainability is obviously a key one. Do they have a revenue model? But do they have a revenue model at the customer level? So it's not enough for the enterprise themselves to need money to then give these products away. But is there in fact a market-based level that includes customers? And have they been successful at sourcing their own capital? On the social impact side, are they as equally committed to tracking and reporting their social impact metrics as we are? Scale. Scale is a really big one. Scale is one that essentially needs deep collaboration within the sector. But to start with, what is the vision? What is the vision for this enterprise, for these entrepreneurs? I mentioned before with Ravi and Shafi from 1298, it's not enough to just want to create change in a small community or in a small environment. We are looking for individuals who want to change systems and want to impact 1 million lives, if not more. And then cost effectiveness. This starts to look at one of the ways that we do measure social impact. The question that we often ask is based around a methodology called BACO, and it stands for Best Available Charitable Option. And the question is, and the bed nets is a great example of this, we can invest in a company making bed nets, but if there's another company down the road that's making a better bed net, that's cheaper, that knows how to distribute it, then let's not spend our money there. And let's truly understand who is doing what and who is doing it best, and understand where best to put our dollars. What Acumen Fund is looking to do is to really fill this gap in the capital markets and really leverage both philanthropy along with capital market investment. And not only in terms of moving the investments to a place where they're actually attractive to capital markets investors. The capital markets is particularly important, once again, when we talk about scale. Acumen is starting to experiment with its first ever for-profit fund that would be offering low returns to investors, but would in fact be able to provide capital at a later stage of an enterprise's growth that right now, due to philanthropic constraints, we can't do. But ideally, what we're looking to do here is to take super high risk investments that traditional venture capitalists would not take, but in order to receive super high social impact and social returns. I mentioned earlier we work in the areas of health, housing, water, energy, and most recently agriculture. We work in the countries of India, Pakistan, and in East Africa we're in Kenya and Tanzania. Three of the things that we've learned most significantly are about local presence, that flexibility of capital is really key. And rather than betting on technologies, you need to bet on innovative business models. And I think my message for emerging social enterprise in Korea in particular is literally just to start, to find some of the key principles and just to start making these investments. You will fail. There will be investments that do not work. Expect that and learn from it. And particularly, as Ray urged yesterday, between business schools in particular, to share these lessons and to really learn from them. We were talking a lot this morning about how to measure social impact. I mean, this is the million-dollar question, essentially. Anthony in particular referenced a platform that Acumen Fund and a number of other institutions have been building. We partnered with engineers at Google and with funding from visionary foundations such as the Rockefeller Foundation, Skoll Foundation. What we started to do was just to say we have 4 offices and all of them need to access the same information at the same time. What we ended up doing was essentially building a platform that would allow for social enterprise organizations across the field and across the world to start to have the same language and the same frames of measurement with which to compare impact and to aggregate where best to spend philanthropic dollars. So, I mentioned before this idea of just start and of where we can learn. And I think sometimes the desire to understand and to define things can get in the way of action. And one of the things I would like to encourage people in this room to do, and this is just a start, this is just some of the resources that I have available that I can offer access to each of you for. Start to read, start to learn, understand what is out there, what is working and what is not. Secondly, start to share what you're learning as well. Large part of the message behind the film that I showed to begin with is this idea around spreading a movement. There's a new way to do this. That's why this conference is here. There's a new way to impact social change. There's a new way to change business behaviours. And once you learn about that, start sharing it as well. And then finally, in New York, I've been quite busy with launching a young professionals group. And it feels to me, from the business schools here and all the rest of it, there's a lot of interest, and I would be more than happy to offer my services in helping launch Young Professionals for Acumen Group, Seoul, Korea. One thing I didn't add here is that the CEO of Acumen Fund, who you saw in the film before, has actually just published a book talking about her initial experiences in microfinance in Africa and moving all the way through to her founding of Acumen Fund. And I'm pleased to announce it's actually going to be printed here in Korea in Korean. So it's called The Blue Sweater. I actually don't know the translation for that. I guess I could guess it. But I think most importantly, we need to understand that the flexibility of capital that we're able to provide is really, really key. We also need to become more comfortable with the nuances. There is no one answer. There is no silver bullet. Acumen Fund was an experiment. We're still experimenting today. And I think comfort with that is really, really important. 가난을 줄이는 것으로만 하자면 청중적인 차선 방법으로 문제를 해결하지 못할 것이다. I keep going. 사정 경제만으로는 해결책이 될 수 없다. 사람들은 의지하는 것보다 참원성을 주장하는 한다. 이제는 다른 미안합니다. 접근법을보다 찾아야 된대 것 같다. What I meant to say, I'm sorry, I really screwed that last bit up. What I meant to say is, I could not be more honoured to be here as part of this conversation, and I really do believe that the time is now. Thank you.